Zechariah chapter 14. See, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. See, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. It's quite interesting to be reading this verse tonight, since it's part of what I wanted to discuss, like I already said. All right. There are, I guess I'm gonna talk about it since I just read this. There are several signs that are about to happen. As you guys know, there was an eclipse, a lunar eclipse, a couple days ago or last night. I don't remember. Which is a brother, they say, to the eclipse that is going to happen on April the 8th, which is going to be during the Feast of Matzot in our calendar, of course, um, which is very important. And I think you guys already talked about it a little bit, but um, I wanted to mention it with a few other things. First, remember that in 2017, 7 years ago, there was a great sign in the heavens, which was the fulfillment or one of the fulfillments of the book of Revelation, chapter 12, when Virgo had the moon under her feet. The sun was in that constellation. She had a crown of 12 stars for Leo, which is right above her head, had a line with three other planets, which are uh, a different type of star. So there were 12 stars for Leo, has nine main stars plus those three. There were 12 around the head or above the head of Virgo. And she was pregnant with Jupiter. In fact, in September 23rd of 2017 is when Virgo gave birth to Jupiter, who had been, or which had been, for 9 months inside the constellation of Virgo, which is amazing. And it is said to have been a sign that has never happened in history and will never happen again. And if it happens, I guess we will already be in the kingdom. But it was a very important sign. Revelation 12 calls it a great sign, not just a sign. Um, and like I said, it was close to the day of Yom Teruah when Virgo gave birth, which is the time when eventually the witness like Moshe, which is represented by that child that is born in Revelation 12, um, will be captured and then killed in Yom Kippur. So it was an amazing sign. I repeat, 7 years ago. S- Still 7 years ago as well, on a different month though, there was an eclipse which went across the United States, as you guys may remember, and it went through seven places called Salem, which was the original name or one of the names that Jerusalem had back in the day, mainly when Abraham went to see Melchizedek. It is said that Melchizedek was the king of Shalem, right? Which eventually became Jerusalem. So Shalem means shalom, means peace. So I find interesting that the eclipse went across the United States through seven places called peace, perhaps announcing 7 years of peace, which would be aligned with the prophecy about the 7 years of the fat cows, right? Um, there would be 7 years of fat cows and then the sick, skinny cows that um, Pharaoh saw and that Joseph interpreted. So those last 7 years represent the last 7 years of history in this reality or the last week of Daniel. So now that we come to this year, we're about to go through another eclipse that will cross once again the United States, but in a different direction, making an X or a cross right above the USA, which some see as a sign that is going down as a country, as a world power. But also remember that the cross not only is the shape in which Mashiach um, was killed on a cross, but also it is the last letter of the Aleph Tav. The letter Tav is a cross in the pictographic and Paleo Hebrew. So a Tav is forming over the United States, which could also be interpreted as the end is coming or the sealing of the chosen few will happen. Um, but not only that, there was an eclipse last year, 2023, which also went over the United States. But when we added to these other two, it would make the shape of the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Aleph Taf, which in Paleo Hebrew and pictographic is the head of an ox. So it's interesting for many reasons. Um, One of them, it forms the Aleph. So now we have the Aleph and the Taf with the three eclipses that happened from 2017 till 2024. Like I said, in 2017, it went through 7 places called Shalom, peace. Now it's going to go through several places called Nineveh. There are several um, people saying that it will go through 8 places called Nineveh, others that it will go through 7 places called Nineveh. It seems like it's going to be total eclipse in 2 places called Nineveh, but it will go next to other places with that same name. And right before that place called Nineveh, it would go over a place called Yonah. And as we know, Yonah, the prophet, was sent to Nineveh. So if it goes through 7 places called Nineveh in a way, which is a place where Yonah was sent to announce punishment, the first eclipse would mean 7 years of peace, shalom. And now this one could mean 7 years of punishment, 7 years of plagues, which would be the last week of Daniel, if that is the will of the Father and that's what the sign is telling us. So not only there were 7 years apart, these two eclipses that form a cross, a tav, the end. Also, there was an eclipse last year that forms a letter Aleph with those other two. So we have Aleph Tav, first and last, Yahweh manifesting as the first and the last. Also, we could say Yahweh manifesting as the ox, the descendant of Joseph, the Aleph, but being the last in the end times, therefore the letter Tav. It's also interesting that during that eclipse that is coming, not only will form the cross, will form the Aleph, will be 7 years apart from the previous one, will, it seems, announce the end of the United States as a power, as a world power. First, it went through Shalem, now it's going through Nineveh and Yonah. I'll just put down that as one, as a sign of Yonah, which Yahweh said that it would be the sign for the end of times, for the only sign that Yahweh would give to the wicked. And obviously, as we want to make clear, it mentions or it refers mainly to the fact of Mashiach and the witness like Moshe and Eliyahu dying and then resurrecting 3 days later. But it's interesting that this is happening this way. The eclipse going through Yonah, then several places called Nineveh, and it will happen right above the constellation of the sea monster, which makes reference to the creature, the great fish that ate Yonah. Then we have also that there will be an alignment of 7 planets. So 7 planets like the menorah plus the eclipse. But of those 7 planets, only 5 can be seen with the human eye. So those are the ones that mainly count when it comes to science and scriptures. So there will be five plus the sun and the moon. So that's seven again. And that kind of connects with the story of when Mashiach multiplied the fish and the bread. Two uh, fish and five loaves of bread, as in five planets, two luminaries, sun and the moon, which amazingly will be eclipsed in the constellation of Pisces. So two fish, the sun and the moon. Oh, come on. The sun and the moon with um in the constellation of Pisces, therefore, as the two fish, and then the planets in that same line as the five loaves of bread. Um, and well, I'm not going to read that chapter because it's a lot, but there are several connections with timing because that multiplying of the bread happened on these month in which the eclipse will happen. So, other than that, there is a comet which might be able to be seen on the eclipse, a comet which they are calling devil because it seems like it has two horns, which a horn represents authority. When comets appear, normally they have announced throughout history that a leader will um, appear, either really powerful or really evil, um, or both. And in this case, there are two horns in the same comet, so it could represent the two beasts of Revelation 13, the beast of the earth and the beast of the sea. Two horns. The beast of the earth, it says, Revelation 13, that it has two horns like a lamb. But if we see it as a positive, then those two horns would represent the two witnesses. And remember that they will be seen as false messiahs, false prophets, or false messiah and the false prophet. So they will be seen as devils, as evil, wicked, because he comes like a thief in the night. So there's that comet. So a comet, an eclipse, and an alignment, same day on Matzot. I didn't mention that. I think on a feast, which is very important. Right there, those are 10 signs. And like I said, there is the three eclipses are making the shape of a aleph, which is the head of the ox. And on one of the ears of that ox, which would be the center of the cross in a way, the other cross I mentioned, it is on Texas. So the eclipses united or are connected above Texas, which is amazing because they are over the place where they found the red heifers in Texas that they would send to Israel. They had several red heifers. They ended up sending five to Israel. Of those five, only one still remains set apart in the sense that all the hairs that it has are red, so it can be sacrificed as the ritual of the red heifer. And the Muslims just came out, well, the group that attacked Israel in October 7 came out a few days ago saying that the attack, amongst other things, was because of the red heifers that they were bringing, because they see it as a threat. They know that if they sacrifice the red heifer, the next step would be to build a temple. And many believe that to do that, they would have to destroy the um, the Muslim place, Al Aqsa, right? The Dome of the Rock. So they see it as a threat. The red heifer is already in Israel, and for those who don't know, that is a ritual found in the Book of Numbers. Remember that Mashiach came to fulfill everything in the spiritual way and to give us understanding of everything. It is said that Shlomo knew all the commandments and what each represented, but he wasn't given understanding about the commandment of the red heifer. It is said that that is the only commandment that wasn't revealed to him. The red heifer represents, in a way, the sacrifice of Mashiach for the world, but also it represents the many who will have to go through death in these end times. Now, in Judaism, they believe that either everybody who is a Jew repents and starts fulfilling the commandments so that Messiah can appear and they can build a temple, or they would have to find a red heifer like this one that they found, which took pretty much 2,000 years because the last red heifer that they sacrificed was 2,000 years ago. And that was just the ninth red heifer in history. So in 4,000 years, only nine red heifers were sacrificed since Yahweh gave that commandment. And 2,000 years ago, the ninth, then we have a important rabbi in Judaism who said that when the 10th red heifer was sacrificed, then the messianic era would begin. Then Mashiach would manifest. According to what they are waiting for, in a way, they will accept the beast as that Messiah that they are expecting. But in the positive sense, if that was coming from the Father, that message, then it would refer to the last, the witness like Moshe, one of the two witnesses. Um, so there were 10, then I added the 11 because they found the red heifers where the eclipse is going through. They send the red heifer to Israel and they want to sacrifice it because, like I said, the second option that they see is that they will have to find the red heifer, which they did, sacrifice it to purify the whole uh, nation, and then they can continue or begin sacrifices in the temple. They already have the altar and they want to sacrifice the red heifer before their Pesach. Their Pesach, because of their calendar, will be about 2 weeks after ours. But I saw some news earlier about them saying that it is from now till their Pesach. They are hoping to sacrifice at any time. So we will see when they finally do it, because that could eventually bring war. Well, it already did, but it would make it worse, and therefore could bring the third um, world war, which we've been waiting for. Not that we want destruction or death or anything like that, but because that will be a clear sign that we are in the second seal. When that happens, I want to make that clear. And if they sacrifice the red heifer, that is a huge sign, and it would open the doors for sacrifices. And remember that there is the the sacrifice that they will do according to the book of Daniel, and the numbers that Daniel gives. They would have to start that sacrifice 250 days after everything began. And if everything begins on Matzot, as it all appears, because of many things we've spoken about here, then that sacrifice would start. A morning and afternoon sacrifice would begin on Hanukkah, and it could very well be if they do sacrifice the red heifer when they are trying to do so. So there are a lot of signs. I hope I am not forgetting anything, but I wanted to say all of that because this verse is one that is coming to mind a lot nowadays. Because if the Jewish people sacrifice the red heifer, a lot of nations will go against Israel because of what they will try to do right afterwards, which would be taking out, um, well, destroying the the mosque in order to build a temple. That's what many expect would happen, and also because they want every Muslim out of those borders. So you know what that will cause um, in the world. In that sense, a lot of nations will help the Muslims against Jerusalem. So you see how it says, and I shall gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem. Now that's why I mentioned everything, but want to also make clear that what I mentioned regarding all those signs point to the possibility of the last week of Daniel starting. Now, this verse actually refers to the war of Armageddon. So actually would be 7 years after that. Just want to make that clear. If everything starts right now, then this verse would manifest 7 years after. It would build up until that moment. The tensions and all of that. So I just want to make that clear. See, a day shall come for Yahweh. Remember that the day of Yahweh is the Shabbat. And Yahweh made creation in 7 days to show that there will be 7 millenniums. The seventh is about to start when we reach the year 6000 from Adam. And Yahushua came to close the year 4000. And he died on the year 30, most likely. So without making all the calculations to see exactly how much time we will have to take out because of the wrong calendars and all of that, 2030 would be, or could be, no, would be, if we don't count any of that I mentioned already, 2000 years after his death. So that would be like a limit. And we are 6 years away from that. Now, I was thinking also how that eclipse and that sign, that great sign that happened on 2017, 7 years ago, and how Jupiter was inside of Virgo for 9 months. Then I was thinking perhaps, and I still think it, and perhaps this is it. I believe that something could happen, something important could happen 9 years after that sign, just like 9 months gave birth, then 9 years. It's possible that something would happen. And if everything started this year, then 9 years after 2017 would be 2026. And that will be the time for the Jubilee. If that would sit, like I want to make that clear. If everything starts now with those signs, then 2026 would be the Jubilee 120. And I say that because that's the day of Yahweh. That's when the day of Yahweh would begin, the year zero for the day of Yahweh. So interesting that we are seeing this. See, a day shall come for Yahweh. And also the separation of the 5 pieces of bread and the 2 fish, because the last week of Daniel then would be separated in 2 years and then 5. The 6th seal, as we see in the book of Revelation, would be the beginning of the millennium. So I'll continue. Start. See, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. And the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. The remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Remember that the remnant normally, in the positive sense, makes reference to the chosen few that Yahweh will save. Then it says, and Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. This is an important verse. It refers, like I said, to Revelation 19, when Mashiach comes to fight on a white horse with the heavenly army against everybody in the world who gather in Jerusalem to fight against him, as it will happen at the end of the week of Daniel. And Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations. For it is said in scriptures that Yahweh is a man of war. And then he says, as he fights in the day of battle. This references the day when um, Yahushua, as the leader, not Yahushua HaMashiach, but Yahushua, son of Nun, as the leader of the nation of Israel, as successor of Moshe, when they were fighting, remember he gave an order for the sun to stop and the moon as well. And they did stop for a whole day so that they could end their fight with their enemies. And that is an amazing story. And it means a lot of things. But one that I just want to mention right now is that in that day, it is said that that was a unique day because that is the only day when Yahweh obeyed the voice of a man because he was fighting for Israel. So scripture mentioned that since Yahweh humbled himself to fight with us, for us, then he became like a soldier. And since he was a soldier, he obeyed the orders of the leader, which was Yahushua ben Nun, the successor of Moshe. That is amazing because then he said, son, stop. Basically, that was then an order to Yahweh as a soldier telling him, yo, could you make the sun stop and the moon since you have all the power? And he actually did, right? So that is amazing in many ways, but one of them, not just the humility of Yahweh to listen to the voice of a man and obey, but also the fact that Yahushua was given the orders on a high place while Yahweh was fighting. So that represents how Yahushua now is at the right hand of the Father in the heavens. And now Yahweh comes to fight as the last. And the last obeys Mashiach. He uh, makes himself a subject of Mashiach, for he is his sovereign, as David when he said, Adoni, my sovereign. So, here we see after the last dies, resurrects, now comes to fight. Even after having fulfilled Psalm 110 that I just mentioned, when David said, Yahweh said to my sovereign, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies as your footstool. So there we see once again that Yahushua will remain in the heavens as Yahweh comes down to bring his enemies down to the earth, which happens in Revelation 12. So, and the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. So that, like I said, references that day when he was fighting with Israel. And in that day, his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives. Interestingly enough, that is the mount where they are preparing to sacrifice the red heifer. They already built the altar, bought the place. They're just waiting, I don't know for what, but anytime till their Pesach. So, and in that day, his feet shall stand upon Mount of Olives. The feet represent the end, also represent the good news. It says, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two, from east to west, a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. It is believed that, well, the main thing here is that he will open a place where there will be enough space for the battle to happen. But also, it is believed that in this valley that will form when the Mount of Olives splits in two is where the new Jerusalem would come down eventually at the end of the 1,000 years, the end of the Shabbat. So It's also interesting his feet, right? Obviously, there are two and represent the end. Just like in the end, the two witnesses would manifest, and they are called the olive trees that are in front of the mighty one of all the earth. So interestingly enough, we see his feet upon the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives splits in two, as in two olive trees, the two witnesses, the 2 feet. But also remember that that same prophecy from Zechariah 4 refers to Yahweh and then Yahushua on the right, the last on the left, who will eventually become one. Here we see when first and last have become one, he comes down and the Mount of Olives becomes two. It separates. So, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two, from east to west, as the manifestation, from the east to the west, as the sun, as the light of the world comes from the east to the west. A very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. The north, remember in Hebrew, is the left, and the south, the right. And you shall flee to the valley of the mountain, for the valley of the mountains reaches to Atzal. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, sovereign of Yehudah. And Yahweh my Elohim shall come, and all the set apart ones with you. And Yahweh my Elohim shall come, all the set apart ones with you. Revelation 19. So it says, and I saw the heavens opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called trustworthy and true. And in righteousness he judges and fights. You see how it says trustworthy and true. In righteousness he judges and fights. So that references first and last. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, for he's the consuming fire, the last. And on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no one had perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, as we see in Isaiah 63, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. So that is Yahushua. And the armies in the heavens, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Dressed in fine linen, that is the same clothing used by the bride in the wedding of the Lamb. So that means that the congregation, the chosen few, will become the army. Followed him on white horses, and out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, because all nations shall gather against them in Jerusalem. And he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, as we see in Revelation 12. That refers to what Yahweh gives the last. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai. And on his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, Sovereign of Sovereigns, Mashiach. Here it says Master of Masters or King of Kings, the last. So first and last. Another thing I wanted to see, let's go to the concordance. Uzziah means my strength is Yahweh. And Atzel, proximity, he has reserved. So reserved comes from the verb atzal, to lay aside, to reserve, withdraw, withhold. All right. So now with that in mind, reading again, and you shall flee to the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountains reaches to that which is reserved. Obviously, that is a place geographically, but also remember that names, because of their meaning, Yahweh uses them to give us more understanding about what he's saying. And well, already close to see the other ones, but okay, here it is. It could be said reaches to proximity, but right, wouldn't make that much sense though. To a place that he has reserved. So that could mean to the that it will reach all the way to the prepared place. Remember that Yahweh will take us to a prepared place, or a place that he has reserved to protect us and sustain us for 1,260 days. So that would mean that it would reach very far, in the sense that most likely that prepared place will not be in this dimension, although it may be in the same space, but not in the same reality. The place that he has reserved. Then it says, also interesting that it says, you shall flee, right? It's telling them because of what is going to happen. You shall flee to the valley of my mountain, for the valley of the mountain reaches to Atzal, which which one of the meanings is to withdraw. So in a sense, it's like saying you will withdraw till Atzal. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of my strength is Yahweh. So that is something that happened, a real king in Yehuda and an earthquake. But by the time of the resurrection of the two witnesses, when the last, represented here by Uzziah, because remember that the last is represented by Boaz, has the same root, strength, os. So the last, as the king that Yahweh sends, whose strength is Yahweh, because we can do all things through Mashiach, who strengthens us. And when they resurrect, there will be an earthquake in Jerusalem that will kill 7,000 people, remember? And it will destroy a tenth of the city. So even though this is something that happened back in the day, and that's the reason why ZecharYah mentioned it in that moment, it's also prophesying about an earthquake that will happen in the resurrection of the two witnesses, which will be catastrophic. And Yahweh is mentioned in that moment, because by the time of Har Megiddo, that moment will be in the mind of everybody, because it will have happened just 3.5 years before that. Then he says, so, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, sovereign of Yehuda. And Yahweh my Elohim shall come, all the set apart ones with you, right? The chosen few on white horses. And in that day, also, it's important to say this, my Elohim shall come, all the set apart ones with you. It doesn't say, and he will gather the set apart ones, or he will harvest, because by that time that would have already happened 3.5 years before that. So now they are all with him. So when he comes, they come with him. And in that day it shall be, there is no light. It is dark. This is a very mysterious verse. I think it can be interpreted in several ways. And it refers as well to that day that I mentioned when Yahushua stopped the sun and the moon. Because when he stopped the sun, then when the time came for darkness, there was still light. And in the other part of the world, when they were expecting light, there was only darkness. So during the time of night, it was day. And for those who were in the time of day, they had night. So it was a different day and a unique day. And here we see that it says, and in that day shall be, there is no light. It is dark. And it shall be one day which is known to Yahweh, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. So like I said, this can be interpreted in many ways. One of them is referring to that same day of that fight, that war in which the sun and the moon stood still. Therefore, That day is a representation of the last war, the war of Armageddon, Revelation 19. You see how it says, but at evening time, so therefore it should be dark. It says there shall be light. What? So it is like the sun stood still once again. And when there was time, well, it was the evening time, there was still light and you could still see the sun. So something similar may happen. Not because Yahweh may need it, like he won't need time to destroy his enemies, but maybe because there will be a change of time itself, because we will be entering a heavenly reality within this world when we enter officially the millennium, in which his kingdom will be completely set up on this earth for eternity. So it is possible that Yahweh will make some type of change when it comes to time, to the way the sun and the moon function. Another thing I wanted to mention regarding that, remember, well, it is possible, like I have said in previous studies, that the extra day and a quarter that the circuit of the sun has, in comparison to the number of days in the calendar year, which is 1 day and a quarter, it is possible that that happened because of that 1 day in which the sun and the moon stood still for a whole day. So it stretched the year for a day. And then when Isaiah, by the order of Yahweh, made the sun go back 10 degrees, that would have made possibly the 0.24 extra. So it is possible that Yahweh would be adjusting once again the clock, the sun and the moon and the stars, to start that new world that will begin with the Shabbat, in which we will enter rest, and then the 8th millennium, which is when we will enter the new world, the new heavens and the new earth. So, and in that day shall be, there is no light, it is dark. So it could be, like, if we just take this, it could be because of the war. It will become dark because of the dust and the smoke and everything. And it shall be 1 day which is known to Yahweh. This is interesting because it could be the 1 day which is mentioned in the new covenant as the day that only Yahweh knows, right? Not the Son nor the angels, but only Yahweh. Which is what many Christians used to say, you shouldn't be studying about the end times or the apocalypse because nobody knows, nobody knows, nobody knows. But if we're talking about this day, if it's this day, then it's referring to the last day of the week of Daniel. By that time, the harvest had already happened. But when Christians interpret the day that no one knows, they think about the false doctrine of the rapture, which makes no sense for many reasons. But here, seeing, and it shall be 1 day which is known to Yahweh. And like we are seeing, that is the war of Armageddon. The way that day will function, that is only known to Yahweh. Neither day nor night. So perhaps everything will stand still for a while, because day and night refer to the passing of time. So perhaps everything will stand still. Time will stop for a moment. So it won't be day or night, because for day to be day, it has to last 12 hours. So there's a passing of time. Same with night. But at evening time, there shall be light. So there will be a adjustment of the Yahweh will adjust the sun and the moon for them to work for the new reality that we will experience from that moment on. And in that day shall be that living waters flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea and half of them toward the western sea, in summer as well as in winter. So that's when the kingdom has been set up already. That's why the changing of time itself, most likely through adjusting the sun and the moon and the stars. And in that day, it shall be that living waters, meaning the teaching of Mashiach, flow from Jerusalem. Jerusalem means the teaching of peace. So it goes with it perfectly. The living waters flow from the teaching of peace. Half of them, as in the first manifestation, half of the manifestation of Yahweh toward the eastern sea, where Mashiach manifested in the east, and half of them toward the western sea. The last manifests in the west. First and last, east and west. Half and half of the living waters, meaning the teaching separated in two as wisdom and knowledge in order to receive, I should say, wisdom and understanding in order to get knowledge of the truth, knowledge of the Father. Half of them toward the eastern sea, wisdom, and half of them toward the western sea, understanding. In summer, which is the first half of the year, when Mashiach manifested and fulfilled his, the first feasts, the first four, as well as in winter, second half of the year, when the last manifests and fulfills the last four feasts. And Yahweh shall be sovereign. This is a huge verse. And Yahweh shall be sovereign over all the earth. Finally, not only high priest as he became through Mashiach, but now king, now sovereign through the last. So this refers to the end. Now we would be in the millennium. And Yahweh shall be sovereign over all the earth. In that day, there shall be one Yahweh and his name one. So there shall be one Yahweh. What do you mean? Are there many? Obviously not. But this refers to what I've been saying already, because here, summer and winter, east and west, that's first and last. But Yahweh will, by that time, have become one once again. Like I always say, Deuteronomy chapter 6 says, Hear, O Israel, hear, O Israel, Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh is one. He is one. There's no one other than him. He's the only one. He's unique. He's unity. He's love. Love unites. Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh is one. That is in Deuteronomy, the Torah. Before the manifestation of the first and the last, right? So Yahweh is one. When he made creation, he made it with the number 2. So creation is 2. Yahweh is 1. That's why in this reality, everything is in 2s. Man and female, up and down, right and left, front and back, hot and cold, sun and moon, and everything else has a counterpart, has a reflection as well. So everything in this reality is in 2, because Yahweh made this reality through duality with the letter bet, which has the numerical value of 2. That's why the first word of the scriptures is Bereshit, in the beginning. Or it could be interpreted as second beginning or 2 beginnings, because there will be 2 lives, temporal and eternal, amongst other things. Very important. But Yahweh, who is one, then he decided that he would manifest in this reality, which is 2. So since this reality is 2, by him entering this world, he would have to separate his manifestation in 2. That's why we see here that it says Yahweh is one in the Torah, Deuteronomy, the last book of it. Then in Yeshayahu, Isaiah, who prophesies the coming of the first and the last, in Isaiah 7, we see that the virgin would give birth to Yahushua the first. And in Isaiah 9, we see the last being born. And it doesn't mention a virgin, so it would mean he's born from a regular woman in the sense of through regular sexual relations with a man. Now, in Isaiah 41, 43, there are 3 verses. Let's just go to 41. You see, it says, who has performed and done it, calling the generations from the beginning. I, Yahweh, am the first, and with the last I am he. So he's saying that he's two now, first and last. Because to manifest in the world of time, then those two concepts are manifested. First and last only exist within time. Yahweh, who is one, is eternal. So first refers to beginning. Last refers to ending. So that only exists in a reality of change, of time. So Yahweh is saying that he would manifest in this reality. And to do so, he would have to do it in 2 different ways, as the first and the last. The way he says it here is beautiful because he's not only saying I am the first, as Mashiach came and showed that he's the son and Yahweh the messenger, etc. But Yahweh says, and with the last I am he, meaning, and with those who come in the end, I will be with them. I am he, with them, with the last. You could also see it as his presence will be with the last, the second manifestation. But this is referring to those who come in the end. He would be with them in person as he was through Mashiach, Yahushua the first. So after Yahweh saying, I am one, then he says, I am the first and the last. Now in ZecharYah, remember that Deuteronomy said, I am one. Isaiah, I am first and last. Now ZecharYah, chronologically, Deuteronomy was first, then Isaiah, then ZecharYah. So Yahweh is saying that he was one. Then he would become 2, priest and king, the sword and the bow, the arm and the hand, the door and the good shepherd, the water of life, the consuming fire, the lamb and the ox, or the lamb and the lion, the male goat and the ox, and many, many, many others, right? He who sows, he who harvests. So after being 2, we see in Zechariah prophesying about the very end when we enter the millennium, right? Because we have been seeing in this chapter that we are already in the Shabbat after the resurrection of the last. And that is when Yahweh once again says, in that day there shall be one Yahweh. There shall be future, because during time there will be 2. But in that moment when time changed, you saw how time changed just a couple verses back, right? Because different day, in the evening there will be light. So when time changes, we enter in a new reality of unity, and therefore first and last are once again one. And his name one, because they have made it as well. They changed his name, so he's making it known that no longer will people call him by a different name. And that's why in Revelation 22, Yahushua refers to himself as the first and last, as the root of David and the branch of David, because by that time the last already manifested and became one with him. So these 3 verses that I just mentioned are huge. And we can add 2 more from Isaiah, but I don't think they're necessary because we know Yahweh says, I am the first and I am the last. And just to add to it, you see that he says he is one. And John says that Yahweh is love. That's why I mentioned it earlier when I mentioned that Yahweh unites, just like love unites. Yahweh Echad is what we see in the prayer of Deuteronomy known as the Shema. The Shema Israel. Listen, Israel, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh Echad, Yahweh is one. If we go to, well, let me add right here, Echad, you see how it says one. And then if I write, and I know most of you, if not all, already know this, but let me just mention since we are in the subject. So here we have one, we have love, one love. Oh, now that I think about it, how interesting. You know how Bob Marley used to say one love? And well, they still say it in, one love, one love. And now I'm gonna say it even more. Not only because of why, because it means something a lot more powerful than many may think. If we go to the calculator, we have Echad. Yahweh said, I am one. Yahweh Echad. Yahweh is Echad. So we could also say Yahweh is 13. Remember that the letters have numerical values. Yahweh is 13. Yahweh is 13. And then we have Ahava, which is love. Yahweh is love. John said that. So Yahweh is love. That's 13. So if we add love and one, because love makes you one. When you love someone, you become one with that person, even more in the sense of a male and a female. When they get married, they become one. And there are two loving each other. So if this one loves the other one, that's 13. If this one loves the other one, that's 13. So 13 plus 13, that's 26. Just like one love, right? Ahava Echad, one love, 13, 13. And 13 plus 13, that is 26. So let me just add Echad right here. We have 26. And as you guys know, that is exactly the same numerical value as the name Yahweh. If I take this out and add Yahweh, we have 26. So the name Yahweh has the numerical value 26, which is what you get when you add 13 plus 13, meaning one and love, for he is both. He is first and last. When they become one, they are Yahweh. First and last, becoming one, that is Yahweh. Because he first came to show his love to the world, giving his own life for the world. For it is written in John 3:16, right? About how much Yahweh loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So he gave Yahushua as the first 13, love. And now the last comes to bring unity through Yahushua, who is the way to the Father. And Yahushua said, let them become one with us, like I am one with you. So by the coming of the last, he brings unity. And therefore the last represents the one. Echad, 13. So 13 of Ahava represented by Yahushua, 13 of Echad represented by the last, 13 plus 13, that is 26, that is the name Yahweh. And that's why Yahweh is saying here, in that day, Yahweh, Yahweh shall be one. In that day, there shall be one Yahweh, and his name one. I repeat, if it's saying that in that day, is because now is not that way. It's separated in love and unity. Love and one. Ahava Echad. But when they become one, they will be the name of Yahweh. 26. In that day, there shall be one Yahweh and his name one. And that's why he says two things, even though he's mentioning the one. there shall be one Yahweh, and his name one. I hope that's clear. It's also interesting just to mention it that the numerical value of Yahushua HaMashiach is 391, right? As you can see right here, the name Yahushua. Take it to the calculator, and we get 391. If you add 3 plus 9 plus 1, you get 13. Once again, the numerical value of Ahava and Echad. And Yahweh shall be sovereign over all the earth, finally. In that day there shall be one Yahweh and his name one. That also has to do with the fact that until that time, Yahweh manifested to humanity through angels and then through his messengers. And therefore, people had different types of understanding regarding the Almighty Creator because of their interpretation, wrong interpretation, because some would think that the angel was the Almighty. Therefore, some thought that Samael was Yahweh. Some thought that Hillel was Yahweh, right? But then Yahweh says, no, I will be one because you will know me personally. You will see the difference between the real Yahweh and every single entity that claimed to be him. Is that clear? All right. So, and Yahweh shall be sovereign over all the earth. In that day, there shall be one Yahweh and his name one. So by mentioning one here and one here, we get 13 and 13. That is 26. That is his name. Right? And that is why also in, well, sadly, let me see if I can find the Paleo Hebrew, or no, the pictographic. V'haya Yahweh lemelech al kal ha'eretz bayom hahu yihye Yahweh echad ushmo echad, and his name one. That is why the name Yahweh in pictographic is written this way. Because first, the arm would come as a man. That is the first. And then to come to the 6th millennium, which is the numerical value of the letter Vav right here, he would come as the Son of Man, represented by the letter Vav, because the numerical value is 6, which is the day in which man was created. He would come once again as a person. So Yahweh would manifest as two people, first and last, as the arm of Yahweh and as the Son of Man. So you can see it even in the name itself. But then he will be one. Then I'll continue. And the land shall be changed into a desert plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. And she shall be raised up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate and the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the winepress of the sovereign. Remember that by that time Yahweh will make the land of Israel bigger, will extend the borders. Also, the names mentioned here are for a reason. And the land shall be changed into a desert plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, to the right of the to the teaching of peace. Rimmon is a fruit that represents royalty. Geba, if I'm not mistaken, is hill. Let me, well, yeah, hill, Geba, and Rimmon, the pomegranate, right, which represents royalty. So when the land shall be turned that one. Right here. All the land shall be changed into a desert plain, from the hill to the kingdom, to the pomegranate, south of the teaching of peace. And she shall be raised up. The congregation, represented by Jerusalem, shall be raised up and inhabited, right, the land, in her place, from Benjamin's gate, meaning the son of the right hand's gate, to the place of the first gate. Yahushua is at the right hand of the Father, the son of the right hand. Also remember that Benjamin was the last son of Jacob, so in that case represents the last, plus the fact that Benjamin was also seen as Ben Yomim, the name, which means son of days, for he was the last son of Jacob when he was old. So Benjamin as the son of days, the last to the place of the first, right? Inhabited in her place from the last to the first. And the corner gate. So it mentions three places: Benjamin's gate, the first gate, and the corner gate. Yahushua is the cornerstone, so in a way fits with that, and he is the gate. And remember that Yahuhanan came to prepare the way. So in a way, we could say the corner gate with the cornerstone, the first gate with the with the one who prepared the way, Benjamin's gate, the last. Obviously, just want to make that clear. First gate, because of Yahweh coming as Yahushua as the first, obviously fits him perfectly. And then when it says, and from the tower of Hananel, Hananel represents the witness Eliyahu. Hananyahu, well, Hananel means the favor of the mighty one, or whom the mighty one favors. Yahuhanan means Yahweh favors. So Hananel refers to the coming of that same person, Eliyahu, who came as Yahuhanan, now Hananel. To the winepress of the sovereign. The last comes as the sovereign, and he treads the winepress of the wrath of Yahweh, as we saw in Revelation 19, connected to Zechariah 14, and also to Isaiah 63. So in a way, Benjamin's gate, first gate, and the corner gate can be seen as the three messengers that Yahweh would send throughout history. But then he mentions the tower of Hananel, Eliyahu, and the winepress of the sovereign, the witness like Moshe. So Hananel and the sovereign as the two witnesses. And before that, in a way, the way that is written, the first gate and the corner gate could be seen as one gate. Yahushua is the cornerstone and the first manifestation of Yahweh, who is the son of his right hand. With all that said, and not changing the name Benjamin, we could see Benjamin first in corner as Mashiach, so that then Hananel and the sovereign could come, Eliyahu and the witness like Moshe. Hope that's clear. And they shall dwell in her, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. There will no longer be destruction, war, or anything. So that means that will happen until the very end of the last seven, the war of Harmagedon. That's a confirmation. And they shall dwell in her, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. And this is the plague with which Yahweh plagues all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall decay while they stand on their feet, and their eyes decay in their sockets, and their tongues decay in their mouths. So some may interpret this as nuclear power, but as we know, Yahweh has all the power, so we could be manifested in many ways. Now, the main thing is that he comes as the consuming fire. So pretty much we can see it as a fire that is so hot that it will consume them even while they are standing. And this is the plague with which Yahweh plagues all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall decay while they stand on their feet, and their eyes decay in their sockets, and their tongues decay in their mouths. Also, the fact that it's, because it depends also on the translation, but the way the fact that he's using the word decay, now I see it like it connects with what we saw regarding Yahweh changing time, right? Perhaps Yahweh could do something with time so that those who are mortal will decay in what would seem to us like seconds, right? In a moment, they could just decay completely as a corpse, but in an instant. And that could happen through the changing of time. And well, many ways. Obviously, Yahweh can do anything however he wants. And it shall be in that day that a great confusion from Yahweh is among them. And every one of them shall seize the hand of his neighbor, and his hand rise up against his neighbor's hand. And Yehudah shall fight against Jerusalem as well. And the wealth of all the nations round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and garments in great quantities. Repeat. And Yehudah shall fight against Jerusalem as well. And the wealth of all the nations round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and garments in great quantities. So also is the plague on the horse and the mule, on the camel and the donkey, and on all the cattle that are in those camps, as this plague. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year. Listen to this, because this verse is huge for many reasons. Remember that after the war of Armageddon, well, I'm going to have to say a little bit more. Last 7 years, the week of Daniel. First 3.5 years, the two witnesses preach. 144,000 are chosen. At the end of those 3.5 years, the 144,000 are taken alive to become the bride, and then the army that comes here to fight. Besides the few, there are many who will have to go through death and then be resurrected to be invited to the wedding to see the bride marrying the groom, Mashiach. So after the first half begins the second one, which is the time of the last plagues. In that time, the worst type of people in the world will be alive, I guess could say. They will receive the mark of the beast, and they will be condemned to the lake of fire. But Yahweh in Daniel speaks of some who may not be believers now, but they will eventually they will become believers when they see everything that will happen. Yahweh says that there will be 1,290 days, 1,290 days in which the abomination of desolation will rule over the earth. But he who awaits for 1,335 days, he will be happy. So there will be some from the nations who won't be caught up because they are not believers in Yahushua. They don't confess his name. They don't follow his commandments. They don't serve him. So they won't be harvested. But they will be smart enough to flee and to not get the mark of the beast. So they would have to stay away from civilization for 3.5 years, exactly 1,335 days. And after that, they will be able to come out and continue to multiply and live in this world for 1,000 years. Because they rejected the beast, they rejected the mark. But by not having been believers, they could not become part of the few. And since they fled, they wouldn't be killed for not accepting the mark. I hope that's clear. If not, just let me know. So this group of people, they will be smart enough to flee and to not get the mark of the beast, but they won't be harvested, for they are not believers in Mashiach yet. So they will stay there away from society for 1,335 days. Then the war of Armageddon will happen. And after that destruction and that plague that will consume all those who decide and dare to fight against the Creator Almighty, thinking that they are fighting a alien invasion, an alien race coming from another world or whatever they are going to tell them, which is most likely that they will be consumed with the plague of Yahweh. Then, after that war, we will inhabit Jerusalem, Israel. Their borders will be broader, and we will live there for 1,000 years. And those who live 1,335 days will be able to come out and continue to live their lives, and we will allow them. And I say we because Yahweh will give us authority over all the earth. And for 1,000 years, they will multiply. And at the end of the 1,000 years, Satan will come out again for a moment, and he will deceive the nations. He will be allowed to deceive the nations again. And after 1,000 years of having no bad influence from outside, all of a sudden the nations will have the thought of coming against us and take what Yahweh has given us. And those nations will be consumed with fire from the heavens. That day, we won't have to fight. They will be destroyed. And whoever doesn't fall in the trap of the enemy would get the opportunity to enter eternity. And I mention all of that because of this verse, because it is referring to that. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations, so it says they are from the nations and they are left, meaning they won't, Yahweh won't kill them because they themselves did not go to fight him in Jerusalem. So there will be people from the nations who will be allowed to live during the millennium. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year. And it says the nations that shall go up to against Jerusalem, because all nations shall fight Jerusalem. But people from all those nations, there are some people who won't agree with it, and they won't go to fight. They will flee. So, and it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, and to celebrate the feast of Sukkot year to year. So they will be forced. Well, it sounds like bad, but I mean, it would be a law to celebrate. Yeah, exactly. It will be a law to celebrate Sukkot. It is a law right now, but they don't care about it. So that's why I had to say it that way. And why I mentioned force, because right now is a law and nobody cares about it. But mainly because that is the feast in which we need to flee. That is the feast in which the chosen few will have to flee to the mountains, away from society, to not get the mark of the beast. And that is therefore a huge time, an important time that I'm sure the two witnesses and the chosen few will talk about, and the Christians, the many, will hear it and reject it because they are waiting for the rapture, right? And the nations don't care about it. But Yahweh left it in the scriptures what to do on that day and what will happen. So those who listen will be ruling in Jerusalem. Those who don't will be forced to now celebrate Sukkot forever, so that they remember what they didn't do and what that cost them in their lives. To some, even their own lives, because some, for not going to Sukkot, will be killed. And others will flee and will be able to live for 1,335 days to come out and multiply. But they won't do it according to Yahweh's will, according to the Feast of Sukkot. That's what I mean. So now all nations who rejected the feast of Yahweh, all nations and even believers from the nations who claim those feasts are not for them, are only for the Jewish people, as they say, now they will have to celebrate it. And that's interesting because if it was a feast for only the Jews, as they say, then why is Yahweh saying here that all nations will have to celebrate it? Right? So it is important. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign Yahweh of hosts and to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. How amazing that Yahweh forced them to celebrate, right? Yahweh will force them to have a good time. And it shall be that if any one of the clans of the earth does not come up to Jerusalem to bow himself to the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, on them there is to be no rain. So there you go. That shows that it is a law. They need to go. And if they decide not to, they won't get rain. So they won't get food. Also, rain represents blessing, represents teaching. So they won't get it. They won't understand. They won't receive the blessing from heaven. Also, remember that the two witnesses have the authority to stop the rain so that it doesn't rain during the time of their testimony. So it's interesting. Now that Yahweh is one, first and last become one. It mentions that those who don't go to honor the sovereign, the king, won't get rain. Just like those who don't accept the testimony won't get rain. Revelation 11. And if the clan of Mizraim, which is Egypt, and if the clan of Mizraim does not come up and enter in, then there is no rain. On them is the plague with which Yahweh plagues the nations who do not come up to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. So how important is Sukkot for Yahweh to make this a law for eternity, starting with the millennium, a law over all the nations? And if they don't do it, they get punished with no rain and everything that means. On them is the plague with which Yahweh plagues the nations who do not come up to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. This is the punishment of Mizraim. So you see that it mentions Egypt a couple times. Remember that those who claim to be Yahudim but are not are like Egyptians, as we see in Revelation 11. So there is the literal Egypt and the spiritual Egypt. And Yahweh refers to mainly the spiritual one, even though we can count the literal one. But mainly the point here is that we celebrated Sukkot for the first time when Yahweh took us out of Mizraim. So he saved us from the slavery in Egypt and took us out. And the first land that we went to was called Sukkot. And we lived in tents. Sukkot means tents, or what they would say tabernacle. This is the punishment of Mizraim and the punishment of all the nations that do not come up to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. In that day, set apart to Yahweh shall be engraved on the bells of the horses. Set apart to Yahweh, which is what was written on the forehead, well, on the plate that the high priest had on his forehead. Now it will be engraved on the bells of the horses. And the pot in the house of Yahweh shall be like the bowls before the slaughter place. The first part refers to the chosen few, the army that comes on white horses. They are all set apart to Yahweh as the body of the high priest, the body of Mashiach. They are all set apart. They are chosen. And then the second part refers to the many, those who went through the slaughter place and who are the bowls and pots of the house of Yahweh. And every pot in Jerusalem and Yehudah shall be set apart to Yahweh of hosts. And all those whose slaughter shall come and take them and cook in them. And there shall no longer be a merchant in the house of Yahweh of hosts in that day. Beautiful. No more merchants, for what that represents. Those who um, sell the good news, those who sell the kingdom. And obviously, those who buy it won't enter the kingdom because it cannot be bought. So the point is that they are deceived, thinking that they can. Just like they are deceived through wrong doctrines, commandments of men, thinking that they can, like some of them, that they can enter to the fulfillment of certain things, that they can enter through the letter or by works. Just like on the other hand, Christians believe in the doctrine of grace and think that they have nothing to do, just believe and they will get into it. And remember what Mashiach did when he entered the temple. He turned the tables because there were many merchants in it. And remember what Yahweh says to the great whore of Babylon and to Lucifer, Halel, in Ezekiel 28 about his about his um forgetting the word, but basically about his businesses, about the way he made all his riches, just like the great whore of Babylon, I repeat. And all who make money with her will cry when she is destroyed, as we see in Revelation 17 and 18. And there shall no longer be a merchant in the house of Yahweh of hosts in that day. So what Mashiach found when he came to the earth won't exist when we enter the millennium, the kingdom of Yahweh, the kingdom of heaven on the. All right, so that's how the chapter